Hello, folks. This is Founder Laerun, and I am filming episode 6 or part 6 of the Fantasy Grounds Unity DM 101 beta session. This will be for setting up your session 1. Last episode in number 5, we did session 0. So this will be for session 1 when you're actually getting into the module. We're using Mine of Phandelver as an example, but you can use pretty much any module you'd like if you're comfortable with. So I'm going to get started. So last time I started a notes section for session 0. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize that or close it for now. And we added the characters to the combat tracker. We added them to our note here so we knew who they were. And we also added them to the party sheet. So now my next step is first I'm going to close the party sheet for right now, is I'm going to create a new note and a new library entry for the calendar. So I'm opening up the calendar again, just like we did in the first video, or video number 5 for session 0. And then I'm going to start a new note. And as you can see, I've already kind of have it started. That's session 0 note. Here's session 1. So you do that by clicking the edit button, and then you'll click the screen button, and it'll form a note for you. So I've already done that. First thing I'm going to do is start setting up my day that we're going to play. So as a group, all the members of the party, the players, and myself have decided that we are going to play on the 24th on Sunday. So I click on this day here, double click, and that sets up my journal entry. Then I'm going to click on the set the calendar date. So now the date is set. Now for the time, we're going to meet at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. And I'm going to set these out to the chat for my players to remind them. And I'm also going to use them in my notes. So we have the log entry started. So I'm going to go ahead and link this. I'm going to drag and drop this over. And then down below, the players know we're going to be starting in Neverwinter. So they can put whatever notes or journal entry they want there. And then this actual calendar entry is going to go onto my notes. I have to make sure it's unlocked. And then I'm going to put the time. So all that is a reminder of when we're going to play. And then this is going to be my journal entry. So I'm done with the calendar, but as you can see, you'll start creating a journal or a log of all the different sessions you've had. And then it will also tie into all the notes. So now I'm starting a new set of notes for session 1. So one thing I am going to carry over from my session 0 is the map. I definitely want this to be part of my next group of notes. And then I'm going to actually open up the story entry. And this time, instead of looking at the whole first part of it, I'm just going to focus on part 1. And this is chapter 1. So I'm going to bring over the index. I'm going to bring over the beginning of the module. I'm going to bring over the ambush and maybe the Kragma hideout. All of these things here should take you anywhere from 2 to 4 hours, depending on how efficient you are and how much practice you and your players have. But anywhere from 2 to 4 hours, that's a pretty good session. I'm going to go ahead and close the story entry. I already have the map linked here, but I'm going to go ahead and link my notes to the actual map itself again. So I just drag and drop this top left corner and drop it on the map. Because this is where we're going to start. We're going to escort a wagon down to Phandelver, and then we get jumped by some goblins on the way there. So I have to decide, where the goblins are going to attack. So they said it's right in this area because this is where the road changes. So I'm thinking it's when they turn off the main road and start heading towards Phandelver. So the actual goblin ambush is the actual combat that's going to take place. We're going to get set up for that. So what I need to do is read these 4 sections. I only put the index here so we can skip around. The goblin arrows kind of gives you an idea of how you're going to get to Phandelver, what you're carrying, what the situation is. This is something that you would probably do along the way. And then as far as the actual combat goes, the fight, that's in this goblin ambush. So that takes place in here somewhere. So these are just little notes along the way that you can use to help you remember what comes up when and where you are in the location of things. Now I'm going to also bring up the goblin encounter itself. So this is the first fight. So what I want to do here is I'm going to drag and drop it here. This is mainly for easy access for me. I went ahead and labeled it. And then also you want to read through how the fight's supposed to go. So basically, in here, it tells you when the characters get around the corner, they notice a couple dead horses. And when they approach the horses, or if anyone investigates, the goblins are hiding on either side of the road and they come out to attack. So you can use a couple different methods to set this encounter up. You can use Theater of the Mind, where basically you bring up the encounter, you use this drag and drop arrow, and then when the time comes, just describe the action with no map, maybe just a photo, and just kind of talk to your players about it. And you can do all your combat through the combat tracker by simply clicking on the first combatant. Depending on if your goblins got surprise or not, that'll determine who gets to go first. But I need to roll for the players because the goblins already have their initiative. So I'm just going to roll for all the players. So in this case, the players get to go first, and I'm going to assume that the goblins did not surprise the characters, but it does tell you to roll to find out. So if you bring up one of the stat blocks on the goblins, there is a stealth stat here. So if you drag and drop that into the dice tower, it adds a +6, so there's a 20. So if you look at your party sheet, you have an overview of your group. And in the overview, it shows you your passive perception. So unless somebody in your party says actively that they're looking for something or looking out for danger, then you just use the passive perception. If not, then you would take the roll of the last character who did a search and compare it against this number. So let's just say the folk hero decided that they were going to keep an eye out and look for danger. So if that was the case, you can go to their skills and you would ask them to roll a perception check. Let's see. And that was a 7, so that's even worse than their passive perception. But that would be a way that they can kind of get around the surprise element. But in this case, the players would have been surprised if that's what was the roll. That can make or break the game. So if you're running Lost Mine of Phandelver, be careful of that first one, because if the goblins get the jump or the first attack, it could turn out to be a TPK or a total party kill. So you want to be careful with that. The other thing is that when you're running Theater of the Mind, you want to have all your character sheets laid out, and this is a very important thing. So I'm going to lock this session 1 notes, and I'm going to replace session 0 with these. So now down in my hotkeys, I have this session 1 thing here. And the actual encounter, I'm going to place that down here. And for now, I'm going to dismiss the party sheet. There we go. Now I'm going to go ahead and lay out all the combatants. I'm going to do this before anyone connects to the table. So like the wizard, I'm going to take each one of these and systematically lay them out so that I can see everything and make sure it's on combat and actions. So that way I can make sure that they have everything they need and I can see everything. Same thing with this rogue. So I'm going to do this to everything in the combat tracker. And I'm clicking on the little pens or the round circles on the right-hand side to bring these up. And that's why I'm doing this, so I can just easily recall. So I'm changing the bottom to combat and the display as action so I can see all the stuff they can do. So right now I'm just setting up everything. And this is really helpful when you got a lot of people on the table. And see, this cleric soldier, he doesn't have anything memorized. So you'd have to have your player go in here and definitely always have those two prepared. Those are bonus domain spells. And then you would have, let's see, Healing Word and Guiding Bolt, I guess would be another good thing. And then I might have Sanctuary and Command. So those are the spells I have prepared for the day. Now when I change it back to combat and actions, now they're available to cast. Now I need to go to the Human Noble, get this guy all set up, and he is going to be on combat and actions. So he has a passive ability of the other character, actually, the human folk hero, has a bow, and I'll show you something in a sec. So this guy has second wind, so that's helpful. So here's the folk hero. Now this guy is more like a ranger in build, and he has 20 arrows, so I need to make sure that he has 20 arrows. He's still a warrior, but nonetheless. He has this fighting style archery, so I want to make sure that's enabled. So any passive abilities, your players want those to be available and active. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this. This gives them a permanent +2 on attack rolls for ranged weapons. So you want to make sure that's on. Then if you go to this wizard, so she already has her spells ready to go, so that's good. And I'm going to put on this Fey Ancestry as a note, because that's just a note. Doesn't do anything mechanically, but it lets the DM know. And then her spells are ready to be cast when needed. So she's on combat and actions. Now when I click on this pin, the rogue comes up. He has sneak attack, he has brave, so that's just a note. And then these other abilities are notes as well. And if he gets sneak attack, then this would apply to him before he makes a damage roll. Then I go down to the cleric, same thing. He's got his trophy dagger that he can throw, 2 hand axes that he can either chop or throw, and then he has a warhammer. Well, warhammer could be used two-handedly, so you'd either have to set that up as a separate weapon, or you can use an extension called weapon handling, which will let you change this from single to two-handed, depending. And then if you had a shield, you can't benefit from that. And he has Dwarven Resilience, which is resilience to poison, so you want to put that on. And then the human doesn't use second wind until he's damaged, so that's situational. And like I said, the folk hero, we've already added the fighting style. So this is why I like doing this. Now the next thing is the goblin. So again, I'm going to lay this out like this and have these all set and ready to go. All I'm doing right now is setting up session 1. I picked up the date, I got my notes, and now I'm just kind of getting everything ready to go for the game. Because then the next session I do, the next video, will be the actual combat. So I'm getting everything in place where I should be before I start the combat at least. And this is also session 1 setup notes. So this one doesn't really come with a map. So if you're going to run this Theater of the Mind, let's say it was the wizard's turn, you bring up her sheet. Let's say she wants to attack with her short blade first, or maybe she wants to do mage armor. So click on mage armor first, and that adds the mage armor to herself, and then you click off the spell, and that would be how you do that. But for right now, we're not going to do the combat, so we'll just have to hold off on that. But I just wanted you to see how these are laid out. So I have everything laid out in order, ready to go. And you click on them by clicking on these little circles or these shields on the right hand side of the stat block in the combat tracker. So in order to make an attack or do anything in the combat tracker, I would bring up that character, drag and drop the roll on the combat they're going after, and that would let me know if I hit or missed. So that's how you'd conduct it, just straight out of the Theater of the Mind, no maps, no nothing. So I'm going to go ahead and temporarily remove the goblins because I'm going to start this over. And I'm also going to do a long rest on the party so that they're refreshed. Any of their spells or anything I accidentally used will be done. And I already have their marching order figured out and who goes when and those sort of things. So now what I'm going to do is set up for a map. So if you don't have an actual map, you can use a photo. Or you can also use on the party sheet, there is a section here called Order, and you can temporarily use this as your battle map. So I'm going to put a grid on it by right-clicking and setting the grid size. So it was that, and then layers, and then you would turn the grid on or off. And you can kind of use this as a way to illustrate how your party travels together. So I think what happens here is these two are usually up front. And then the cleric is usually in the back, and the rogue's kind of all over the place. But that's generally how they traveled. And then if you wanted to, you could drag over the goblin and kind of set them up on here to kind of give you an idea of how things are on the battlefield. Or if you don't like that method, what I've learned to do is go to maps and images. I take a look at the artwork that comes with, and then I will select Lost Mine of Phandelver. And here's the artwork that comes with it. And you have a cover, which comes later in the module. You have these goblins. Now, I might show this as just like for flavor or color. So what I'm going to do is in my setup notes, I'm going to drag this art, and this is just going to be a handout. So what happens is if I want the players to see these goblins after the goblins attack, I can right-click on here and share this sheet. And now this image becomes public. But once I'm done with this image, I will click on this little P here, which means public, and make it unpublic. So now that this is no longer shared if they don't need it. Now this area map, I would probably leave this one shared. But as far as, handouts and such, they're situational. So I'd only share those for a little while. Now this Tribord Trail image is what I usually use to simulate the combat without actually having a tactical map. So I'll go ahead and stretch this out. I'm going to right click on it, click layers, click set grid, just kind of left click and drag this out till you kind of get an idea and you have a little bit of room here, some space to put your tokens. And now I'm going to take all of the good people from the combat tracker here on the bottom left of the frame. There's a helmet, might be a dragon head, but it's green. So that's all the friendly people in the group. So you can drag and drop those all at once. And I'm going to lay them out in that rough format that I showed you earlier. So this one, and the rogue's kind of hanging out. Normally how they travel together. So there's some horses up ahead of them, and as soon as they investigate, they'll get attacked. Now what I'm going to do is set up the goblins. So I'm going to drag and drop the goblins, or I can put them on the battle map ahead of time. So here is my group of goblins. So instead of just sending them to the combat track right away, I'm going to place them ahead of time. So I'm going to go ahead and click menu, and I'm going to click delete from tracker and delete only foes, because I'm going to start over. So now I'm going to drag these onto the map. So number 1 will be here. Here's number 2, number 3, and number 4. So this is where they're all hiding, basically. And then if I want to rezoom the map, I can just right click so I can zoom it, click view, and then go to zoom to fit, and that will recenter it. So now the party members are basically set where they're going to be, and this is where the goblins are going to start. Once I close this, they will disappear, which is normal. But before I close it, I'm going to link the encounter to this image that I'm going to use for my map. The session 1 note, I'm going to link this to the map, and the encounter, I'll link that to the map as well. And then for the session 1 notes, unlock this, and then I'm going to change this to, I'll say, battle picture, triboard trail ambush. And then on the right hand side, I'm just going to call it triboard trail, and I'm going to unidentify it so that they only see this and not my notes. And then I'm going to link this to here, so that way I know what it is. So now that I have my notes figured out, I can place this where I want it and close it, and it's already bookmarked. All the players are set up, all the NPCs will be set up. Then what will happen is when I actually bring up that encounter and I close it, the goblins will disappear until I'm ready for them. Then when it comes time to play, while the players are connecting or whatever, I'm going to click the down arrow, and the goblins are already in place. They're not visible yet. They're not visible on the map. They're not visible on the combat tracker until I make them so. Once I'm done, I'm going to get everything laid out where I want it before I save everything. And in this chat window, there's a command /save. It's lowercase. Hit enter, it saves all my work, and when I come back, I should be able to recall most of the stuff. So this is where you want to be before you run to combat. You want to have the combat tracker set up, you get everything cleaned up, you get your encounter set up where you want it. This is where I have mine set. You have all your combatants set up, and your map or your display is ready to go for your visuals. So this is where you want to be for session 1 before you start playing. That is the prep. I did some reading, I did some linking and figuring out what I'm going to work with, my materials, and I just start using the layout that I have to run the adventure. So the session 1 notes gives you the time and the date, that big map that we use, and if I want to bring it back up, I can just click on here, and that'll bring it up. When I want to dismiss it, I can just close it. Then if I want any of the other stuff, I can pre-place these so that when they do come up in the story, I don't have to sit here and remove and change everything around. I can put them right where they need to go. So there's the ambush, there's the goblin arrow, that's the index, so I don't really have to worry about that. And then for the ambush, there's the encounter itself. Then for the handout for the goblin, that's just temporary, but that's where that will pop up. When I'm done with it, I'll close it and unshare it. So that's for the handout. And then for the battle map, it's ready to go in position. That's where I want it. If I want to close it for some reason, I can just bring it back up. So this is where you want to be before you leave your table. So that's the end of video number 6. Video number 7, I'm going to go over the actual combat and how that plays out. So hopefully this will help you in your setup for any of your games. You can use the same type of model. The main difference is that I use is the calendar to kind of keep things straight and the notes. You can do it any way you like, but I found that that's more efficient and a lot more focused. So if you want to use that methodology, you're welcome to. You don't have to. You can do it your own way. But this is just a suggestion based off of experience and from using the software. So you have a good evening, and I hope everybody gets to roll, and they're rolling a bunch of 20s. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.